It is currently on.
But it's not microphone for in here. It's just.
It is both.
Oh, it's, oh, that's good. Okay. Here. Here, let me put this over here. Put that into there. Is it on? Is it live now?
It is live now.
Testing. 1, 2, 3, 4.
Okay, perfect. We're good.
Okay. Today, I am not Cotton Mather. I have tried to dress appropriately for a somber subject, but I am not Cotton Mather. He didn't cotton to witches.
Can we get you any coffee or tea or cookies?
No. No, thanks. If I had coffee at this rate, I'd be climbing the walls at midnight.
Yeah, I'm not a coffee drinker.
No, I like my coffee in the morning, but that's it.
Get you going during the day.
Yeah.
Yeah, I never adjusted to the taste of coffee. I've always been a tea drinker.
I can't drink tea. It seems to upset my waterworks. I mean, one of these things where you drink tea and then you want to go all day and you want to go. No. We don't do that. Although I used to like to drink tea, but I said, wait a minute. How come my body is reacting this way? So.
I remember I was in Costa Rica, and they were grinding the coffee they'd grown.
Where was this?
In Costa Rica.
Oh, wow. Yeah.
They were grinding the coffee they'd grown fresh on their farm, and I thought, you know what, I'm going to try this coffee. I'm sure it's the best coffee I'll ever have access to. If I don't like this coffee, I clearly just don't like coffee.
Did they roast it down there?
Roasted
I hope,
for me
yeah.
over an open fire, and they had this big, like,
Oh, I bet that's the best.
I didn't like it. I just never liked
Liked it.
coffee. And at that point, I gave myself permission. It's okay. I just don't like coffee.
Mm-hmm.
You know? And I didn't make myself drink it again.
Well,
I was thinking, oh, I've just got to do
now I seem to like bitter beverages. I like IPA and I like coffee with half and half, but never with sugar.
Yeah. My husband's
You-
Cuban.
You don't want to ruin it with sugar.
Yeah. My husband's the same. He's from Cuba, so he thinks I'm crazy that I
Well-
don't like coffee. He's all about the deep, dark
Oh, I'm
bitter
sure.
espresso, you know?
I'm sure he would want it served properly.
We get some folks
Ah,
online
here.
for you. Oh, great. Hello. Welcome. Hopefully you bring your crowds with you.
Hi, I'm Brad Nutting. I'm glad you could make it here tonight.
Pleasure. Looking forward to this.
Good,
Yeah.
good. We'll
Yes,
have
indeed.
we'll have fun, but I hope we have a few more folks come strolling in. We
We will have some folks online.
well, that's so yeah.
Online, so it'll be nice to have
Oh,
some
that's
folks
right.
you
It's
can
on
talk
Zoom,
to.
isn't it? Yeah.
Yes.
Yeah, I thought I didn't live too far away, so it's nice to see the real thing, isn't it?
Exactly. Please help yourself to coffee.
Could I do
tea,
that? Yeah, and then we can
That's
next-
for you. Yes, absolutely. And then, Don, if you don't mind, I'll just give you, before we get started, a very brief introduction to
What?
our sponsors.
Oh,
And then
yeah,
turn it over.
yeah. But nobody seems to be in a big hurry
No.
to come. So, do they usually stroll in, or
Yeah, sometimes they will stroll in. We might have some folks already online. They could probably hear the sound
Okay.
if they can't see the video. We usually start the stream about 10 minutes early, just so that folks who are planning to come online know that we're here.
mm-hmm. Okay.
Yeah, ever since the pandemic, we're just struggling to get people to come
Yeah.
in.
Well, that was what killed it for the lifelong learning program, because I taught a couple of classes and was fine, and then
Yep.
and they said, "Would you like to do it online?" And I said, "No, no."
Yeah, we try our best to be able to provide folks with an experience both in person and online, so meet folks wherever they're at. Be interested to learn more about your topic tonight, because I'm still reasonably new to the Framingham area,
Okay.
Massachusetts area.
Oh, well,
So,
this will give you a good introduction.
yeah, very apropos for
Well, that's what I think you said initially that, oh, hey, that would be good for October.
Yeah.
And I said, but gee, I'm wanting to learn more about cotton mather. I mean, it always fascinated me anyway, but when you teach a whole course on colonial history, how much time can you spend on one
Right.
person? But
Excuse me, I'm just gonna since Brad's gonna be roaming the stage, should I turn the main lights on, or is the way you have it all set okay? Okay, I'm gonna go ahead and turn these front lights on just so that we can see you a little bit better since you're
okay,
lives.
good,
Is that all right for you?
fine.
We got another 2 minutes for folks to
Well,
park and get here.
if we end up with 4 or 5 people, I'm just going to sit down and we'll have a chat. That's what I'm going to do.
Yeah, sounds great. Hello.
One more.
How are you, Bill? Welcome, welcome. Please help yourself to some coffee and tea if you like. Help yourself to coffee, tea, and cookies. Yeah, right? And then if folks have any questions, as I mentioned, people at home won't be able to hear what we're talking about in the room. So if you would just quickly summarize the question or statement before you answer it so that people at home can hear what we're
Oh, do I hear the?
No. So like if he asks you a question,
Oh.
just say, oh, so you were asking me about blah,
okay,
blah, blah.
okay, I get you.
Yeah.
No, I said, is there any way people at home can ask questions? And I said, I think that's a little technologically requires a little bit more investment.
Yeah, they could put it in the chat, and in that case, Tara will let us know, and we'll be able to answer that, that way as well.
Are you going to be here for the hour?
Yes, I am. Yeah.
Oh, hi, I'm Brad Nutting.
Bill Ray, how are you?
Hi.
Nice to see you. I'm a trustee for another 2 months.
Oh, okay.
Helping out. But I'm still going to be involved in the program.
Yes, absolutely. All right, is it about that time, Tara? We've still got a minute, right? I'm gonna grab my microphone.
Let me sneak a look at the current state of the room.
Yeah, I'll just stand kind of next to him and then.
Look,
Yes. All right. You wanna
that looks like a foreboding closet there.
count of 5? Yeah, please. All right, I'm gonna give you a brief intro for the folks at home and we'll get started. All right, so welcome everyone. My name is Lara Bilaumat, she and hers. I'm the head of outreach and community experience here at the Framingham Public Library. We're so thrilled to welcome you here in the room and also folks at home to another of our lifelong learning lectures. For those of you who aren't familiar, this is a partnership program with the Framingham State University, and we are thrilled to present a number of different experts on a number of different topics. Tonight, we're very excited to have Dr. P. Bradley Nutting talking about Cotton Mather, a man of two worlds. Thank you so much to our sponsors, the Joseph L. Frund Foundation, courtesy of Liz Fideler, and of course the Friends of the Framingham Public Library, without whom none of our programs would be possible. For those of you in the room, would you go ahead and take this opportunity to silence your cell phones? Any alarms, ringers, clocks, anything like that? Go ahead and turn those off for us. Folks at home, please feel free to grab your favorite beverage, kick back a little bit. And then we do have an evaluation form for those of you who are in the room. We would love to hear from you what you thought about tonight's event, if you have any ideas for future events. And if you haven't joined our mailing list, we would love to have you on there, because we're the library. The only thing that we'll ever send you is more information about great free library programs. And we hope you'll join us next week for our next session. And if you give me 2 seconds, I can cheat and tell you what the topic is. I'm sorry, I should have had that prepared. Lifelong learning lectures. Oh, excuse me, I'm so sorry, I'm going to mispronounce his name. Dr. John Hubrezzi. Does anybody know how to pronounce that correctly? I'm going to make sure to ask him for next week. So we invite you to join us on Thursday, October 26th, next week, for our next lifelong learning lecture. But for tonight, welcome to Dr. Nutting.
Hello, those who are here, those who are watching through the benefit of modern electronics, which, of course, Cotton Mather never would have had an opportunity to take advantage of, although he might have enjoyed being a television preacher. I'm not sure. I'd like to start just by telling you about an answer I received on an examination many years ago now. It was an identification question, and the identification was Cotton Mather. Okay, that's all I expect. Person, Puritan preacher, Bass Bay, witchcraft trials, something. Okay. The answer was this. Cotton Mather, also known as Cotton Mother, was Eli Whitney. And he was called the Cotton Mother because he invented the cotton gin, and it gave birth to the Cotton Kingdom, which spread across the lower South. That is indicative of the confusion that many people have when it comes to understanding Cotton Mather. Even historians, I've looked in a couple of textbooks just for this, and there's a lot of confusion about this man. And I think there are two reasons for that. One, I think he has the longest bibliography of anyone in all of American history. There are over 450 printed titles to his credit. Every week, I think he ran down to the printers with something else, to hit the press. Somebody once said Cotton Mather suffered from diarrhea of the mouth, diarrhea of the pen. Okay, and that's one reason. When you write 450 articles or whatever, maybe you're going to contradict yourself or something or other. But I think there's a more important reason here why people are confused about Cotton Mather. And it wasn't his fault at all. He was born in 1663, and the time that he was alive, between 1663 and 1728, is a time when we have an overlapping of two different worldviews. If you can imagine two circles that are going to overlap, and in the middle you have the gray area, and his life is spent in the gray area. So what's happening? Well, one thing that is clearly going on is the scientific revolution, which got a kickstart back in the early 1600s, back in the mid-1500s with Copernicus, and then Galileo, and then Leibniz, and so on and so forth. So there's a scientific revolution in the works here. And there's also the beginnings of another intellectual movement, the Enlightenment. This is the period in which Descartes is operating. Locke is going to be writing a little bit later on. And that's part of what's happening. In the year 1662, John Boyle published for the first time, what we call Boyle's Law, which describes the behavior of gases with relationship to volume and pressure and so on and so forth. And on the handout, which some people haven't been able to get yet, but they shouldn't feel badly about coming up and getting a copy, in there you have a formula. That is Boyle's formula, which according to his biographer, is the first time anybody used an algebraic equation to write a law describing the behavior of physical matter. Okay? So Boyle's law is like and Boyle himself had so many different other things. He also proved the existence of a vacuum, which Aristotle said was impossible. Now, how did he do it? Well, in part because scientific revolution is about empiricism. It's about looking. It's about experimenting. Okay? There's, you've just passed those out as people, if anybody else comes in. So here we have a scientific revolution going on. The very next year, the years Cotton Mather was born, Boyle and a bunch, said John Boyle, it's Robert Boyle, but Boyle and a bunch of his friends got together and they formed something called the Royal Society of London for the purpose of exploring physical knowledge. And the king was so pleased about all of this, he gave them a royal charter. And the Royal Society of London is still in existence today. And their purpose was to encourage people to explore the world, and they also provided a mechanism to let other people know what was going on. They came up with what we would call today a magazine called the Philosophical Transcriptions, which was sent out. If you joined, you subscribed to it. But anybody who wrote in with some sort of a new idea or a new discovery, if the board thought it was okay, they'd put it in the Philosophical Transactions. This is important to note because Cotton Mather was a frequent contributor to the Philosophical Transactions and was ultimately a member of the Royal Society. Okay? So here's this scientific revolution going on. Wow. At the same time, we have one of the last witchcraft trials in England. In the period 1640 to 1660, which is the high point of Puritanism in England during the period of the Commonwealth, you have a blip in terms of the number of witchcraft cases. And they're all tried in the same town, Bury St. Edmunds in Suffolk. In 1645, 20 people were found guilty and hanged. And in the year 1662, 3, whatever, 2 old women were accused of witchcraft. And they were tried and convicted and executed. But what's so important for us is that the judge was Matthew Holt, Matthew Hale. Matthew Hale, who's one of the great scholars of English common law. Matthew Hale presided over the trial, and we believe he wrote up an account of the trial, which is called Trial of Witches, and there's the picture right there of the frontispiece, okay, in which they think he wrote it because it was so well done, okay. Everything that happened, the evidence that was brought forth, and at the end, of course, the question came up, well, okay, these people, they're old ladies, they're probably into white witchcraft or something or other. But what did it was spectral evidence. People said, oh, I saw her specter. She was over there, but I saw her specter, the image of herself projected over there. That's it. The judge permitted spectral evidence in trial. Without spectral evidence, those women could have walked free. Sorry. Okay? Now, say, well, why am I talking about it? Well, it's the same time that the Royal Society is being founded. They're still hanging witches in England. But this book, The Trial of Witches, is reprinted, and it ends up in the library of Cotton Mather and Harvard College, and it is one of the books that the judges at the Salem witchcraft trials used to figure out how they were going to try the witches. There it is. Hey, there's the model. This is how we try witches. All right? So, but here, this is all going on 1662, 1663, when Mather is born. Okay? He's in a world in which you almost have a world in confusion, or at least a world in overlap, where they're kind of running together like that. Now, Cotton Mather himself who's the eldest son, and ultimately, I guess, the only son, of Increase Mather, who was the son of Richard Mather, one Puritan clergyman after another here. He's the only son. And I don't know if anybody here is the only son. But when you're the only son, sometimes the father expects a hell of a lot out of you. I had a certain experience being the only son with 4 younger sisters. Increase Mather was preparing Cotton Mather to be able to either succeed him or join with him as minister of the North, or the Second Church in Boston with 1,500 members. So that kid was being trained from the get-go. He is the youngest person ever to enter Harvard College at 11 and a half years, and he passed the Greek and Latin examinations with flying colors. There's only one little problem. He stuttered like mad. You saw the King's Speech? He stuttered like mad. I wonder why. I wonder if it had anything to do with the amount of pressure that had been put on him by his father. I don't know. I can't say that. I'm not a psychiatrist. But the kids, you can know how kids are, the other students, they bully the hell out of him. They teased them, and of course, the more they teased them, the worse his stutter got. So he dropped out his first freshman year there, and studied at home to try to lick his stuttering. And because he said, "Hey, I can never be a minister if I can't speak in public. So maybe this is quite important. Maybe I should be a doctor. I'm kind of interested in medicine. Yeah, maybe if I can't lick this stutter, maybe I should be a doctor." And this interest in medicine, he had in his very earliest days here, at 12, 13. He was finally able to get over a lot of the stuttering. And he tells us later on some of the things he did to try to get around it. But he finally graduated from Harvard and took a master's degree at Harvard, of course. Where else is he going to go? And ultimately, in 1685, he becomes the co-pastor of North Church. Not Old North Church, that's Anglican. This is Second North, or Second Church, or Old North, or whatever. It was a congregational church. Okay. He was elected co-pastor, as I said, in 1685, and he served as co-pastor until 1645, when his father died. He's serving as his father's assistant for what, 40 years or whatever? I don't know about people here. I think it might be a tough deal to be serving under Dad for most of your adult life. He only outlived his father by 3 years. But I think he found another way to shine, and that was by the writing of over 450 works. Maybe I have trouble speaking, but by God, I can write like a little demon here. Maybe that word demon is inappropriate for tonight's lecture. But in any case, so here he is, and he's the co-pastor, okay? And he's all right. Well, he was able to preach. And of course, one of the reasons why is that he wrote, back then, you always wrote your sermons all out, all 2.5 hours of them or whatever. And so he was able to write, and if he knew he had trouble with a particular word, I suggest he deep-sixed it from the text. So he was able to get through, but he apparently suffered from a tendency to stutter. for his whole life. But nevertheless, he succeeded. Now comes the first challenge. 1688. He's in his mid-30s here. And there's an old woman named Goody Glover who's accused of witchcraft. Her Goody's daughter worked for a family, and the children accused her, or maybe the parents accused her, I don't know, of stealing some linen. And linen's a big deal back then. If you ever read inventories of estates, one of the primary sources, if you're a rich guy, you want to have lots of sheets and pillowcases because they were hard to come by. Okay, but they accused Goody's daughter of having stolen some linens. And Goody got really ticked off and started accusing the little children of being liars and all this sort of thing. And then the children started behaving strangely, making strange noises, throwing themselves on the floor, okay, mewing like cats and barking like dogs. They were having fits. And the doctors didn't know what to do. They called in the clergy. They said, "What's going on?" And they said, "Well, you know what? What we have here are Goody's fits." And you know what they always say? If Goody fits, wear it. I'm sorry. But nevertheless, so Goody's accused of witchcraft. They all ran and they give her the 3rd degree. And we know all about it because Cotton Mather either was there or he got hearsay evidence from what was going on. Listen, Goody Glover was a perfect candidate for being a witch. Perfect, absolutely perfect, classic. Her husband, before he died, accused her of being a witch. Okay, how many husbands have ever said that about their wives? Okay, but hey, wait a minute. He accused her of being a witch. Okay, all right. Hey, now that's maybe important, but maybe not. Okay, she's also a Roman Catholic. Ooh, Irish? Oh, Irish, Roman, I don't know how the hell she ever up in Boston at this time. But hey, she doesn't speak English that terribly well, and she needs 2 interpreters sometimes. So her ability in English is marginal. All right? She's an older woman here too. And let's see, what did they get? Also, she was accused by the children of tormenting them with her specter. So we got spectral evidence. She's a Roman Catholic. She doesn't understand English, all that. I think from reading the account, this woman's got some problems up there. Okay, I think she's suffering from some dementia. All right, and she's, I don't know. In any case, all right, she's going to be tried. They try her. Guess what? She's convicted. She's executed. But before she's executed, she curses the children. Oh, that's bad. That's real proof of being a witch, because if something happens, mischief after anger is a good way of knowing who's a witch. If somebody says, "I hope your dog drops dead," and the dog drops dead, you're a witch. Well, so the kids here are continuing these fits and everything. Cotton Mather says, "Wait a minute now. I want to take 2 of the older children. One was 13, one was 10 maybe. I want to take them into my house, into the rectory here, and I want to watch what's going on here. I want to, and this is, it's over there. This is what he says in this write-up. He wrote up this thing called Memorable Providences concerning witchcraft and possession. All right? And he says, I'm going to run an experiment. He uses that word experiment 4 times in describing what was going on. And he says, well, what we do, we have experiment and we observe. Does that sound like the scientific revolution? Well, yeah, he's trying to apply, and he's read Boyle, and he has 3,000 books, well, later on, but ultimately he has 3,000 books in his library. He's reading every damn thing that comes off the boat, okay? And he certainly has read Trial of Witches. So he has the kids, and he focuses on this 13-year-old girl. Okay? And she does all sorts of weird things. There again, barking like a dog, lying on the floor, paralyzed. Paralysis, going deaf and dumb. Hey, what's going on? But the best of it is she rides a horse around the house. She's sitting in a chair. Honest to goodness. And then sometimes she gets up, goes up the stairs into his study, comes back on down. She's riding a horse. Boom. Oh, my God. And he writes it all down. He writes it all down. And he says, people have to know what's going on. You know, we have a real problem with witchcraft. He's read all the books, you know, the discovery of witches, the trial of witches. How do you recognize a witch? He knows all this stuff. And he said, we got to know that this is happening here. This isn't just in England. This is happening here. And so he prints his book, you know, The Memorable Providences. Now, you say, so what? Well, guess what? It gets on the bestseller list. You know, it's not the New York Times bestseller list, but it's the Boston area publisher's favorite. You know, this guy, it becomes a bestseller. It's all over the place. People are reading it. Okay? And one copy ends up in the library of the Reverend Mr. Paris in Salem. And when the kids in his house start behaving strangely, guess what? Oh my God, it's in the book. Cotton Mather saw the same damn thing. Ooh, well, this all lies behind, it really helps trigger the Salem witchcraft hysteria. Not that the girls had read the book, but that adults had read the book and they thought, oh, well, that proves it. And nobody apparently thought that the girls were acting out. In Mather's account, he says that there is no possibility of what he calls dissembling. In other words, faking it. No, this is for real. He's convinced. Remember, he has these kids in his house for like a month and a half. You can imagine how it would be to have somebody like this in your house for a month and a half. Oh my God, of course they're possessed by this, you know. But this all goes, I don't think I'd be off to use a sort of a contemporary expression. He lit the fire. He lit the fire. If he hadn't written that book, I don't know. It's quite possible it would not have taken off the way it did. But the fact that it was so widely read in the colony anyway, you can see how this thing would grow very promptly into a major hysteria in which 20 people lost their lives, over 100 were accused. I mean, this is really something. And halfway through the trial, he wrote another book. called Wonders of the Invisible World, in which he tried to demonstrate that the judges were absolutely right in what they were doing. This is absolutely right. And here again, would you believe, another bestseller? Okay, another bestseller. And the judges up there were using the same books Mather was reading, the Trial of Judges, the Discovery of Judges. Hey, devil's mark. One of the things they do, take people's clothes off and look around and see if they can find a strange mark on their body. Now, I don't know about you, but I got plenty of strange marks, and I've earned them in 79 years, okay? And remember, these are almost all of the people, well, probably 60, 70% are elderly women, okay? And some of them are probably practicing white witchcraft anyway. In other words, spells and stuff. Well, what do you do for a hangnail? Well, you soak it in all sorts of herbs and this sort of thing. But hey, the judges, devil's mark, even grosser, the old expression, witch's tit, that somewhere in the body would be a place where the demons could suck sustenance from your body here. The demons who were the servants of the witch, this kind of thing. So this is, of course, the whole thing eventually ran its course. But what made it work was the fact that they read that book, A Trial of Witches, and here's the Chief Justice of England, Matthew Hale, saying there's nothing the matter with spectral evidence. I do not believe it would have been possible for any of those people to be found guilty and executed if it hadn't been for spectral evidence. But that did it. And they had the book. Hey, that's the way it is. And Mather was one of many who was aware of that book. He never apologized. Many who were involved, even some of the girls, admitted that they were wrong. The devil made me, well, you've heard that one. The devil made me do it. Yeah, there was possession, but the people who were possessed weren't the people who were accused. They were these girls who got into a cycle here. Well, you probably are aware of how this sort of thing worked, but what they got is if a girl wanted to get out of it and say, I really don't want to do this anymore. These people aren't. If you say that we're doing something wrong, we're going to accuse you of being a witch. So it fed on itself. It was terrible. Mather never apologized. Judge Samuel Sewell, who was one of the judges, apologized. He stood up in Meeting House for, I think, 20 years, silently, and let the deacon read his formal apology for anything he had done during the trial. And ultimately, the government tried to compensate the families. But Mather never apologized. And I must honestly, I had a revelation the other night. I was tossing and turning. What am I going to say about this? I really think that with Mather's outlook, because of some of the things that he did later on, he's very concerned about doing good acts for the benefit of the whole community. Okay? Memorable Providence. It's mostly about Goody Glover and all that. But you know what he did? Also, this is really weird in retrospect, although I think it's very revealing. I'm going to have to share it with you, even though I thought maybe I shouldn't do that, but I'm going to. He attached to all this account of the Glover trial and all that, he attached a sermon that he preached when somebody committed suicide. Right? Now, you might think you know how a Puritan minister in the 1600s what he would say about suicide, but that's not what he says about suicide. The interesting thing that he says is, this poor person who committed suicide was deluded by Satan that he was worthless, that God didn't love him, that his family didn't love him, that his neighbors didn't love him, and he felt lost. And he said, I pray if anybody gets to that state that they tell somebody about it. They tell their minister, they tell their spouse, they tell their children, so we can pray about it and be supportive to that person. Does this sound like the same person who was out to get every damn witch in the colony? Well, in both cases, he's acting in some ways as a pastor. He's trying to protect people from witches. See, if you really believe in witchcraft, then you don't want people to suffer from it, right? Later on, of course, he's going to be very concerned about physical diseases. He doesn't want people to suffer, right? But, as I say, I kind of wish that he'd said, I think I got a little carried away on this witchcraft thing, but I have a little word to say at the very end about that, so just remember. But he never formally apologized. But there's another whole aspect to Mather, which is here part and parcel of the scientific revolution. The most clear-cut and well-known example is how he dealt with smallpox. Now, for years, people have been saying, smallpox is God's vengeance upon the sinners. Yeah, like the little 3-year-olds and people like that. No. What Mather did, he thought about this, and he describes it later in a book, actually, that I have here. He said, what's interesting is if you get smallpox and you survive, you can never get it again. I wonder why. Of course, he's talking about acquired immunity. He doesn't know what to call it. But he said, there's never heard of anybody who caught smallpox a second time. And then he had a slave that had been given to him by the congregation. That's when you gave your pastor a present, instead of a Christmas gift of fruitcake or something, you give him a slave. There were slave owners and slave traders in the congregation. So they gave him this slave, Onesimus, which is a good biblical thing. You know who Onesimus is in the New Testament? He was a runaway slave. And Paul said, go back. You ran away, go back. But I'm writing a letter, and I'm going to tell your owner, you damn well better let you be free, because you deserve it, and it's wrong. You'd be better to be free than to be a slave. Well, Onesimus. Now, there was smallpox in Boston around 1701. Onesimus did not get sick, and he was talking to Mather, and Mather said, blah, 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 and Onesimus said, no, get the smallpox. No, don't do it. No, why? Oh, what? Because he quotes him. You Cuddy, here. You take a pus from a person with smallpox, and you cut it here, and you put it and wrap it up, and they get too sick, and then they're well, and they never get smallpox again. He's talking about inoculation, or technically variolation, which is taking the pus from one place to another. And he said, now that's very interesting, because if the person would get get smallpox that way, if they get it at all, it's a very light case, but that's still, they never get sick again. At least that's not what Onesimus said. No, it's the same thing as getting the whole schmeal. Then he picked up the latest copy of the Philosophical Transactions of the Royal Society of London, and there was a letter there from a doctor in Constantinople describing the same procedure being used in Turkey. Mather says, hey, I thought Onesimus might be onto something. Here's the Royal Society is saying, well, this is happening. And there was something else. I'm not sure exactly when it was, but he took pus from a smallpox victim and he put it on a slide under his microscope. He had a microscope. This is the same guy who accused witches, you see. But he's got a microscope, and he looks in there, and he sees little animals. He called them animals. Mules. I can't quite pronounce it. It's like animals, and it has U-L-E-S. It's like molecule. It means little animals. And if they're going around, he said, my golly, they're alive. You know what? That's what's causing these people to get sick. And I'll bet, this is what he theorized, and it's in this book that I've got. He says, I'll bet what's happening here is these little animals ultimately, reproduce, and they reproduce as like eggs or something, and somehow these eggs are excreted from the body, and they get in the air, or they get on the clothes of other people, and then people get sick from the same disease. What's he talking about? Germ theory of illness. Nobody else is talking about this, not to Louis Pasteur.
Is this simultaneous to, I can't remember his name, but the researcher who discovered the milkmaids getting cowpox and then not getting cowpox?
No. I'll tell you about that. Thank you for raising that up, because a couple of things happened here. In 1721, Boston, a ship comes in, and some of the people have smallpox. We have an epidemic going on. What Mather did, immediately realized, oh my gosh, it's smallpox. He writes a letter to all of the doctors in town, and he says, this is what you need to do. You need to inoculate people, and do it quick. Okay? And some of the ministers heard about it, and a lot of the ministers said, yeah, inoculate them, do them quick. Okay? But there was a huge blowback. A lot of people said, no, you can't do this. You're tampering with God's will. Mattis says, I don't believe God wanted little children or anybody else to suffer from this horrible disease. God gave us brains, and he gave us nature to explore. And if we can find something, it's like quinine, which he knew about. Hey, it prevents malaria. Even though the Catholics discovered it, it works. We need to inoculate and do it fast. The doctors were afraid because there was such blowback about what was going on. Okay, the newspaper, the New England Courant, lambasted Mather. Lambasted him, but good. And the editorial writer did too. And you know what the editorial writer's name was? Benjamin Franklin. He was writing the do-good essays for his brother James's newspaper. But the newspaper was against him. They were against inoculation. And other people, talking about religious conservatives and proof texting. Somebody said, wait a minute, it's wrong because the Bible says the sick are in no need of a doctor. There, that proves it, right? In other words, you don't make somebody sick, even though it's a little, tiny bit of smallpox. You're making them sick, and that's against God's will. Somebody else said, the way to stop him is throw a firebomb in his house. The anti-vaxxers were mean. Yeah, they threw a grenade in his house, which was supposed to explode. It was this fireball, and it had gunpowder in it. But the fire went out before it blew the house up. But it was strong opinion against it. But you know, over 800 people died, well, excuse me, over 800 people caught smallpox in Boston. I have a population of, I think it was like 4,000 then. But the death rate of those who caught it, the death rate was 14%. For anybody who caught smallpox in Boston that time, 1721, 14% death rate. Of the 200 people who finally got inoculated, guess how many died? 6. And some of them, we've heard this expression, suffered from prior illnesses. But still, that's 2%. 2% of the number. So, and guess what? Would you believe Mather wrote it up for the Royal Society? And the doctor, Dr. Boylston, Zebediah Zebiel Boylston, even went to England and met with the Royal Society. They elected him to the Royal Society. They printed the reports of all of this in the transactions of the Royal Society. And what it does is it creates, over the years, a willingness to pay attention to Dr. Jenner, because Jenner comes up with inoculating with cowpox in 1798. But that's like 30, 40, 50, 60, almost 80 years later. But in the meantime, people started using inoculation. When George Washington and got the army together back there in Valley Forge, inoculated. If you don't want to be inoculated, go home, because we don't want you in the army. Okay, so it worked. Okay, so here is Mather, who is in the forefront of, shall we say, the cutting edge of medical research. Okay, he could have been Times Man of the Year had there been a time. All right. Yeah, he could have been given the Nobel Prize in Medicine. Really, seriously. But the idea got out there, and he came to the idea not because he used Aristotelian logic. Aristotelian logic says a vacuum cannot exist. Okay, he experimented, looking at the microscope, looking at examples, reading about other people, and hey, that's how he pulled that off. Okay. Now, there are other things he did in terms of science as well, though. He was the first person, as far as we know, who put together an experiment to prove what we call hybridization of flowering plants. Now, usually we think of, oh, well, that's, Gregor Mendel, right? Catholic priest. Here again, these clergy are right, they got pretty well-educated people, okay? But what he did was he got a farmer to plant a row of Indian corn in the meadow, like this. And on one side, they had yellow corn, yellow maize, whatever, but it was yellow corn like most of us eat today, sort of like that. Indian corn in the middle, all sorts of different colors. And then on the other side, yellow corn. And I'm not sure exactly how he oriented it, but what he proved, and wrote it up for the Royal Society, is that the direction that the wind was coming, that those plants, yellow corn, and here's the Indian corn, and that are coming from that direction, that very few of those yellow corn plants, when they grew to maturity, very few of them had any colored corn kernels. On the other side, it's like 20% here, 80% there. And he said, hey, that's it. What he he's demonstrating, and he wrote it to the Royal Society, is the sexual reproduction of flowering plants. And he knew a lot about sexual reproduction because he had 15 children. Okay? But I'm not sure what it was that got him elected to the Royal Society, whether it was the hybridization, whether it was the inoculation, or whatever. But I would just say that there's one last thing that I want to talk about here in terms of science and maybe how far ahead he was in some respects. And that's this, which I was so lucky to get my hands on this, because I think I got it for $10 or something on the internet. It's Cotton Mather, The Angel of Bethesda. This is the first medical manual written in American history. Okay? And hey, you got a problem? Check it out. It's in the book. Okay? Now, a lot of these things are, they would, they're terrible. You would not want to use any of some of these healing things. But they're not just his ideas. He consulted over 200 medical experts. He had this huge library. So directly or indirectly, he's citing in this over 200 different medical people, like what's good to heal such and such. Well, so-and-so says this, someone says this, someone says that. And I've seen this. But, no, you would not want to use most of these cures. I mean, the remedy for what he called piles, or we would call hemorrhoids, you don't want to go there. You do not want to. And there are a lot of other things. And some of what he did used the traditional healing methods. See, he's not entirely a man of the modern world, right? He's living in two worlds. So a lot of these cures, or supposed cures, and treatments like, bleeding, emetic, enemas, whatever, whatever. These traditional remedies, sometimes, not all the time, but sometimes. But what he didn't do was to hold to the old order of medicine that was still being taught in the universities. And the universities were still teaching that there are four elements: earth, air, fire, and water, that the human being is made up of humors that correspond to the rest of the material world, and that consequently there are four elements, and therefore there are four cures. And that's why there's bleeding, emetics, purgatives, and they call it blistering. Maybe some of those were okay sometimes, but not as a rule of thumb. He never thought there was only one cause of illness, which was imbalance of the humors. He said, no, there's all sorts of different diseases. They have different causes. And he theorized that there were basically eggs of these animules drifting around, and that's how we got sick. Germ theory. Okay. But what I enjoyed the most reading this is the common sense approach he had to some of these things. And why did he have? Because he observed. He made house calls. Believe it or not, doctors did too. But he's one of the few, it's in his diary. Diaries up at Framingham's Day. He was forever visiting parishioners, especially those who were sick. I don't know when he had enough time to write his sermon, visit his parishioners, and write 450 pamphlets. I don't know. But what he said was, there's all sorts of different theories about how to heal people. But what I'm suggesting is that there are ways for people to stay well. what do we call it today? Preventive medicine. He said, now let's try this on. Drink lots of water. Drink lots of water. It's hard to drink too much water. Drink lots of water, that's good. Okay? Eat and drink with moderation. Wait till you're hungry before you eat. And get up and leave the table before you're stuffed. Eat and drink moderately. Okay, drink lots of water, eat and drink moderately. Don't smoke. Tobacco is bad for you. How about that? Another one that he said was, he looked at different occupations and why people in those occupations got sick. And he said, you know, if you're a sailor, you should drink and eat a lot of lemon and lime juice. That was not the rule yet in the Royal Navy. Some people were doing it already, and he said, hey, it works, you know. Yeah, use that. But the other thing is, he said, let's see, I think I marked it here. The other thing is to live a, let's see, do I have it right in here? Is this it? I can't find it here. Well, in any case, what he said was, the other thing is live a decent life. Live a life where you are a benefit to other people. You know, do good for other people. It'll make you feel good. Okay, it will help you. It'll help you feel good. People who are, he doesn't say mean and nasty, but people who are frequently a problem to others, they're only hurting themselves. So, you know, try to live have a good conscience, and that's good for the rest of your health. Okay. I'll conclude with what I thought was a very, very interesting experience here. In 1724, which is only 4 years before Cotton Mather died, he was visited by a young man who had recently left Boston for Philadelphia. He was visited by Benjamin Franklin. He was a member of Benjamin Franklin's congregation when he lived in Boston. Now remember, he'd ripped the guy over the coals over the inoculation thing. So what would you expect when he came to see Cotton Mather? He welcomed. He says, come on up to the office, or the study, or whatever. And he sat down, and they had a nice long talk. And he was very friendly. He never raised the question of the smallpox, the whole thing about it. You were an anti-vaxxer, huh? Hit the road. No. And after they were done, as Franklin was getting ready to go, these old colonial houses, the doors sometimes weren't very big. Got to save on something or other. I don't know. Save on heat by having a low ceiling. But there was a very low lintel or whatever over the top of the door. And as Franklin was going out, Mather shouted to him, "Stoop! Stoop!" Boom! He hit his head on the top of the door. Okay. And Mather said, "You know, young man," and this is, I think it's in Franklin's autobiography. He says, "You know, young man, I think you've got a lot going for you. But let me just say this: don't get ahead of yourself. Huh? Don't think too much of yourself, because if you do that, you're going to put yourself in a situation where you're going to basically get enemies who are not going to treat you very well or whatever, And Franklin said, yeah, he was telling me that I need to be a little more humble. As part of the autobiography, he goes through the whole inventory of how he tried to be perfect and realized he wasn't humble. So, but he said, Cotton Mather was telling me that, be careful. Know when to stoop. Know when to stoop, and know when to raise your head up high. And some part of me wonders if that was a kind of apology, that he'd been pretty brash and brazen about the whole witchcraft thing, and maybe if he'd had a little bit more humility, it might not have gone the way it did, and maybe he would have apologized or whatever. But I just found that to be kind of a revealing remark, and also the fact that here is Mather, who, a lot of people say, oh, he's the last of those old Puritan minister tyrants and everything. He's a far more complicated person, and truly, I think, a man of two worlds. Thank you. Thank you. I'd be glad to answer questions that anyone has.
What we'll do is we'll just pass the mic around. There's only a couple of us, so if you could ask your questions into the mic so the folks at home can hear what we're talking about.
Thank you very much. I enjoyed that a lot. Something I've been curious about with Cotton Mather is his name Cotton is connected with John Cotton.
It's
I
a
understand.
family. He was,
what was their
he was related
connection?
to Puritan ministers on both sides. He couldn't escape it. The Mathers and, let me see, Cotton Mather, John Cotton. I think John Cotton was his grandfather on one side, and that was his mother's side, and his father's side was Richard Mather. So they combined it. He's Cotton Mather. He's got the ancestry from both sides of the family.
Was it normal to use somebody's surname as a first name like that?
I don't.
It was
I
John
don't.
Cotton.
I
such an I don't know
I
anyone
think
else
it
has been
simply
called
was
Cotton.
because of the whole family deal. But in my experience, in terms of genealogy and in colonial history, yeah, I don't see that too often. Usually, they tended to stick with almost everybody in New England, biblical names, or they would repeat the name of the let's say the father's name, the grandfather's name, and so on and so forth. They even did, which I think most of us would not do, that if a child died, they used the name for the next child, which is kind of, yeah. Well, that's from Scripture. Yeah, increase your faith. Yeah, because some of the girls had really nice names, like Prudence. I had a relative named Prudence who was married out of wedlock. I mean, it was a 7-month deal. Prudence, her father was the minister. Woodbury, Connecticut.
You mentioned early on that 1640 to 1660 was a time when Puritanism was at its highest sort of influence.
In England.
Had that something to do with what was going on in England? Because that was the time
I think so.
interregnum.
I think you're raising a very, very important point, which has been referred to by authors with far greater knowledge than I do about it. That East Anglia is the Puritan heartland, and New England is the Puritan heartland, God's country, as we used to say. Okay, God's forsaken country sometimes. But I can't exactly say what it was, but I think there was something about Puritanism that made it particularly susceptible to belief in witchcraft and witch hunting. I don't know exactly, but I think part of it, and I'm just guessing here, part of it might have been the enormous stress that the Puritans put on the concept of God's elect. You're chosen. You're God's chosen. Well, what if you're not chosen? There's a polarization there between the saints and the sinners, a real polarization. And maybe that made it easier to accuse people of witchcraft. I mean, it happened before. But I'll tell you, England's funny because there are only 500 documented executions for witchcraft in England over a 400-year period, whereas thousands are being executed on the continent. But East Anglia kind of sticks out like a little bit of a sore thumb. And I think there's a real connection with Puritanism.
John Cotton, I think, was from Boston, wasn't he? Boston?
Yeah,
Boston, England.
yeah. You know, now that's not East Anglia. That's really kind of far to the north there. But most, yeah, Boston. Well, Ipswich. I mean, all of those. Look at all the place names here, and well, Suffolk County is where they had the witch trials, and Suffolk County's right down the road. That was a good question, because I pondered that. What was it about their mindset that made them so susceptible? Although they had executions for witchcraft in Virginia, too. About 20 people were accused of witchcraft in Virginia, but only 11 were executed.
I think the other thing that was going on over here in America.
Sorry, would you just, so the folks at home can hear it? I think the mic's actually off. Yes, perfect. Thank you so much.
I wonder if one of the differences, what was going on in England is that as there wasn't a king, there wasn't a Stuart king, people in America were pretty much ignored. And because they were Puritans and there was a Puritan sort of rule going on in England, I think the American colonists were pretty much left to their own devices.
Yeah, during the Commonwealth.
Right.
Yeah.
But then
Too much was going on. They could be
right.
ignored.
Well, I think they felt they were sort of kindred spirits, and
Well, a lot of
they
people went
trusted them.
back. A lot of people went back to fight with Cromwell.
Civil War, yes. But then once the Stuarts came back, once Charles II came back, then he would try to impose sort of the royal
Yes.
command, as it were, over them, which they didn't really like because they'd been free of that for so
Right.
long. But
Were there other questions?
Just an observation, and
Wow.
perhaps a question.
No, that's all right. It just
And
really
that
came
is
on loud.
that, in some ways, in these two worlds of Cotton Mather, at least in his scientific world, he was very open-minded, even forward-thinking. But looking at his acceptance, for example, of the specters in the witchcraft, do you think that in a way he was also very open-minded there, in that he was willing to accept or to look at all explanations?
I don't think so.
No?
No, I think that is kind of exceptional for what happened later. I think he was right at the end of Memorable Providences. I think it indicates where he was coming from. I am resolved after this, he says, never to use but one grain of patience with any man that shall go to impose upon me denial of devils or of witches. I shall count that man ignorant who shall suspect, but I shall count him downright impotent if he assert the non-existence of the things of which we have such convictions.
So there really is a kind of
He's
two
not gonna-
worlds within him.
At least when he wrote this, he wasn't going to budge. He was afraid that the witches are going to take over or something or other. But as I say, he never really apologized, except maybe the little hint of there at the end. That's why Laura asked me to do the Cotton Mather, because I had suggested another topic, which actually would have been fun too, but not for Halloween. It was called Winners and Losers in American History. Okay, but in some ways, I thought about this. Cotton Mather could fit in there, because what is he? Is he a winner or is he a loser? Well, in some ways, he's a loser, I think, but in other ways, he's a winner. So there you go. But that's human nature, isn't it? Okay, any other questions? Well, this has been great. This has been fun.
Fantastic. Well, thank you so much, Dr. Nutting. Thank you all. Thank you all for being here tonight, both in person and online. For those of you in person, we would love to hear from you on our evaluation form in the back. Please help yourself to coffee and cookies. And we hope to see you next week on Thursday at 7 p.m. for our next lecture. Thank you. Thank you so much. Yes, let me just go plug.